You know, it's funny how much of what we think we know about fitness, well, it turns out to be kind of shaky when you really start to dig into it. Like,
Absolutely.
we hear these things all the time, like to get lean, you have to cut out all fat, or if you want more energy, just load up on carbs.
Right, right. Those kind of blanket statements.
Yeah, exactly. But is it really that simple? I mean, I'm starting to think maybe we're missing some pieces of the puzzle by just blindly following those one size fits all rules.
I think you're right. I mean, that's why it's so important to question that conventional
Yeah.
wisdom, to dig a little deeper.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I think we're going to be able to do today with this resource that you shared.
Right, and that's where I'm excited to jump into this deep dive. We're looking at Will Brink's Bodybuilding Revealed.
Okay, great.
And my goal with this is to really understand those fundamental nutrition and supplement strategies for building lean body mass, getting in better shape, but without getting caught up in all the hype and misinformation that's out there.
I think that's a great goal.
Because it's really hard. It seems like every week there's a new miracle diet or supplement promising, amazing results. And it's tough to sort through all that noise and figure out what's actually backed by solid science.
Yeah.
And that's why this ebook really appealed to me, because it promises a comprehensive and up-to-date approach to nutrition, supplements, and training. And it's very specifically steers clear of those kind of sensationalized claims like lose 20 pounds in a week or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think we should focus on the nutrition and supplement aspects today and see what kind of key principles we can pull out of this.
Yeah, and this is what's so great about Will Bike is he's pretty much known for doing exactly that, giving you a science-backed understanding of things so you can make better decisions for yourself.
All right.
So, yeah, let's dig in. What do you want to start with?
Okay, so let's start with the real foundational stuff here, the macronutrients.
Look.
The book kicks off with protein and breaks down some really key concepts right away. For instance, it clarifies that proteins are built from amino acids.
Right.
Some of those are essential because our bodies can't make them.
Right.
Others are non-essential. And then there's these conditionally essential ones that our bodies might need more of in certain circumstances.
Right. Yeah, so it's kind of like a good starting point because it's like, okay, so we're talking about protein, but what is protein, right?
Right.
And so it starts with the amino acids.
Exactly.
And it explains that when those amino acids link together, they first form what are called peptides, and then longer chains create the proteins. And what's really cool is that the specific sequence and shape of these amino acid chains determine the protein's unique function within the body.
Oh, interesting.
So it's kind of like, different keys fitting different locks. Each protein has its own specific job to do.
And so this is where it gets really interesting, especially if you're thinking about, where you're getting your protein from.
Right.
Because the book challenges this idea that all protein sources are equally good, for building muscle.
Yeah.
So it looks specifically at the difference between plant and animal proteins.
Okay.
While it acknowledges that plant-based foods, like beans, nuts, seeds, they're healthy, it points out that they're only relatively high in protein compared to other plant foods.
Right.
More importantly, plant proteins are often lacking in one or more of those essential amino acids that we just talked about.
Exactly, yeah.
So for building muscle, that's a really important distinction.
Huge distinction, yeah.
So you can still certainly meet your protein requirements with a well-planned, plant-based diet.
Right.
But, the book really emphasizes that animal sources like beef, skinless turkey and chicken breasts, dairy, and eggs generally provide a more complete and readily available profile of all those essential amino acids that your body needs.
Yeah, and it's good to have that sort of laid out, explicitly, because you might just assume that protein's protein.
Right.
But then when you start to look at where you're getting it from and how it's actually utilized in the body, there is a difference.
Exactly. And it even goes into some of the extra perks that you get with certain animal proteins.
Yeah.
For example, beef, it's not just protein, it's also delivering that bioavailable heme iron,
Yeah.
which is a really highly absorbable form of iron. It's got creatine in there, carnitine, carnosine, CLA, all kinds of B vitamins, zinc, selenium.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like a whole package of stuff that's all playing a role in supporting muscle development and just your overall health.
Yeah.
And then similarly, it notes that lean poultry, like skinless chicken and turkey, they offer that high quality protein, but they've also got niacin, vitamin B6, and selenium in there as well.
Ouch.
It's fascinating.
So moving on to fats, the book starts by explaining their basic structure,
Okay.
which is actually pretty straightforward. It says they're essentially chains of carbon atoms with hydrogen and oxygen attached. But what's really fascinating here is that the length of those carbon chains and the number of double bonds that they contain, that's actually what determines the different types of fat and how they affect your body.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So it really breaks down that oversimplified, idea that all fat is bad.
Right.
The book stresses that we really need to understand the difference between saturated fat, trans fat, monounsaturated, and polyunsaturated fats.
Right.
And it emphasizes that, contrary to what a lot of people think,
Mm-hmm.
moderate amounts of the right kinds of fat are actually crucial, especially if you're active and focused on, your well-being.
Exactly. And this is where it becomes really relevant for anybody that's trying to build muscle.
Okay.
Because the ebook talks about this link between the fats that you eat and your body's production of anabolic hormones, which are the hormones that basically stimulate growth.
Right.
And a really important one here is testosterone.
Yeah.
It even points out that studies have observed a connection between a higher ratio of saturated to polyunsaturated fat in the diet and higher levels of testosterone. It also says that people who eat mixed diets, including animal products, tend to have higher testosterone levels compared to like strict lacto-ovo vegetarian diets.
Wow, that's a really important thing to know if you're trying to optimize, your muscle growth.
Right.
So it's not just about avoiding fat altogether. It's about, understanding the different types and making sure you're getting enough of the right ones.
Exactly. Now, an important thing to note here, though, it's not just about eating as much fat as you possibly can.
Right.
Because the book says there seems to be kind of an optimal range for fat intake when it comes to this hormone production, which is around 30% of your total daily calories.
Okay.
And it suggests that going much higher than that, say in like the 30 to 40% range, doesn't necessarily give you any extra benefits in terms of hormone production.
Interesting.
So it's about finding that balance.
So that's fat.
Yep.
Now let's switch gears and talk about carbohydrates and the glycemic index, or GI. The ebook explains that the GI is essentially a ranking of how quickly different foods cause your blood sugar levels to rise after you eat them.
Right. Okay.
While it was originally developed to help people with diabetes manage their blood sugar, it also has implications for body fat storage and energy levels for everyone.
Right. Makes sense.
And the key player here, as the book explains, is insulin.
Oh.
It highlights insulin's role in shuttling glucose, sugar into your muscles for energy storage.
Okay.
And it also points out its potential to boost protein synthesis, which is why some people even refer to it as the primary anabolic hormone,
Right.
meaning it can actually promote muscle growth.
Right.
But here's a really important point that the ebook brings up about the GI. It points out that GI values are typically determined in a lab setting, with each food being tested on its own.
Okay.
This doesn't always reflect how we eat in the real world, where we're usually combining, lots of different foods in our meals.
Right.
Right. And this mixing of foods, whether you're adding fat or fiber or protein, it can significantly change the overall blood sugar response you get from a meal.
That's interesting.
It gives some examples like, putting peanut butter on a rice cake or adding an oil and vinegar dressing to a salad can actually lower the overall GI of that meal. Even cooking methods can make a difference.
Oh, wow.
Pasta cooked al dente has a lower GI compared to pasta that's cooked until it's soft.
Interesting.
So you can't just look at, a single food's GI in isolation.
Right. It's about the entire meal.
Right, exactly. And the ebook also cautions against this idea that you can just eat unlimited amounts of low GI carbs.
Right.
Just because a food has a lower impact on your blood sugar doesn't mean that the calories in it suddenly disappear.
Of course, yeah.
You can still gain body fat if you consume too many calories overall, even if they come from low GI sources.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Calories still matter.
Calories always count.
Exactly. But the book does guide us towards making some smarter carbohydrate choices. Okay, good.
Recommending whole grains like brown rice, 100% whole wheat, as well as fruits and fibrous vegetables. It emphasizes that these foods aren't just sources of carbohydrates, they also provide essential fiber, vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants, all of which contribute to your overall health in ways that go beyond just, their macronutrient content.
Right. And you feel better, too, when you're eating those kinds of foods.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
On the flip side, the ebook lists some higher GI and lower fiber foods that it suggests we should be, a little more mindful of. These include things like white flour pastas, white rice, white potatoes, white breads and bagels, processed breakfast cereals, instant oatmeal, certain fruits, sweets, soft drinks, candy, and most fruit juices,
Yeah, okay.
with the exception of post-workout for a specific reason.
Okay, so we might want to come back to that.
We'll touch on that.
Okay, so now that we've got a good handle on the basics of protein, fat, and carbohydrates, the book moves on to a really crucial aspect of managing our weight and body composition: total daily energy expenditure, or TDEE.
Okay.
And it stresses how important it is to really understand where our calories go in our metabolism.
Right, and I think this is something that a lot of people don't really think about.
Right.
You know, they're just sort of focused on the foods and the exercise, but they don't really think about what's happening inside their bodies.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, and understanding how your body uses energy every day can really empower you to make much smarter choices with your diet,
Right.
whether your goal is to lose weight, gain weight, or maintain your current weight. So the ebook breaks down, your total energy expenditure into three main components: resting metabolic rate, or RMR,
Okay.
the thermic effect of food, or TE,
Okay.
and then the energy expenditure of physical activity, or EEPA. And the book points out that your RMR, which accounts for the largest chunk of your daily calorie burn, is primarily determined by your lean body mass.
Right.
So the more muscle you have, the more calories your body burns at rest, just to keep things running.
Which is another good reason to build muscle.
Exactly.
But
TOE, which is the energy your body uses to digest and process the food you eat, makes up about 10% of your TDEE.
Okay.
And then you have EEPA, the energy you burn through any kind of physical activity,
Right.
which the ebook identifies as the most variable component of your PDEE.
Right, because that can change from day to day depending on what you're doing.
Right, exactly. And that includes everything from, involuntary movements like fidgeting to structured exercise. It's pretty fascinating. And it even notes that a heavier person or a leaner person will actually burn more calories than a lighter or less lean person of the same weight when performing the same activity at the same intensity.
Wow. That's interesting.
Right. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
To give us a practical way to get an estimate of these numbers, the book briefly mentions the Harris-Benedict formula
Okay.
as an example of how you can calculate your RMR and then your TDEE. It even gives you the formula. RMR equals 66 plus 13.7 times your weight in kilograms, plus 5 times your height in centimeters, minus 6.8 times your age in years.
Okay.
Then, to get your TDE, you take that RMR number and you multiply it by an activity factor that reflects how active you are.
Okay.
The book gives an example calculation for someone who weighs 200 pounds, which is about 90.7 kilograms, is 167.5 centimeters tall, is 41 years old, and has an activity multiplier of 1.55.
Okay.
After crunching those numbers, it arrives at a TDEE of around 3,190 calories, after also factoring in the thermic effect of food.
Okay.
So it gives you a ballpark of, how many calories someone with those stats might burn in a day.
Right.
Understanding your TDEE and all its components can really empower you to strategically adjust your diet and your activity levels, for effective weight management.
Yeah, it's like giving you the tools to really understand what your body needs and how to manipulate those things to reach your goals.
Right.
Okay.
Now, once you have a better understanding of your TDE and, your target macronutrient intakes, the next logical step is planning, when and how you're going to eat those nutrients.
Right.
Which brings us to meal planning and timing, another area that this ebook covers.
Okay.
And this is where it gets really practical. It introduces the idea of dividing your total daily calorie and macronutrient intake into 5 to 7 smaller meals spread throughout the day.
Okay.
The reasoning behind this is to help keep your blood sugar levels more stable.
Right.
And to ensure, a more consistent supply of nutrients to your muscles throughout the day.
Right.
To make this a little less abstract, the book gives us a concrete example.
Okay.
So it looks at that 200-pound individual we talked about earlier who needs 200 grams of protein, 437 grams of carbs, and 121 grams of fat per day.
Okay.
Then it shows you how you could distribute those amounts across 6 meals. Okay. Resulting in approximately 33.3 grams of protein, 72.8 grams of carbs, and 20.2 grams of fat per meal.
Okay.
This gives you a practical template for how to, organize your daily food intake.
Yeah, that's really helpful.
It then really emphasizes the importance of what you eat right before and right after your workouts.
Okay.
It even references a study by Dr. Paul Cribb that demonstrated greater improvements in both strength and lean muscle mass in people who consumed carbohydrates, protein, and creatine in the periods immediately before and after their training sessions, compared to those who consumed the same nutrients at other times of the day.
Oh, wow.
So it's really highlighting how nutrient timing can play a significant role in, optimizing your results.
So it's not just what you eat, it's when you eat it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to make it easier to consistently implement these nutritional strategies, the book offers some very practical tips for meal prepping.
Okay, good.
It suggests getting yourself organized with things like good quality storage containers,
Yeah.
a salad spinner for washing and drying your veggies,
Right.
a kitchen scale for, accurate portioning and just basic, handy kitchen tools.
Right.
It also recommends doing some advanced preparation,
Okay.
pre-cooking grains and legumes,
Right.
making a batch of homemade protein bars or pancakes and freezing them, for quick meals or snacks,
Right.
and taking advantage of pre-cut or frozen fruits and vegetables to save time during the week.
Right.
It even throws in some easy side dish ideas,
Okay.
like tabbouleh, hummus, just having, pre-cut veggies ready to go with some dip.
Right.
All really actionable stuff, for fitting this into a busy lifestyle.
Right.
Because, most people aren't, professional chefs and they don't have all day to cook.
Yeah, exactly. All very, very practical advice for incorporating this into your daily routine.
Yeah.
Now let's move into something that's, I think, often generates a lot of buzz and confusion,
Yeah.
which is supplements.
Okay.
So chapter 5 of this ebook delves into this area. And it starts by just acknowledging the sheer volume of supplements that are available.
Right.
And the fact that a lot of them are just reworkings of existing ingredients or, very similar to other products.
Right. It's a huge industry.
It is.
Yeah.
And it makes this really interesting observation about how supplements are often marketed. It points out that certain ingredients like carnitine, for example, might be promoted for both muscle building and fat loss. While other things like those marketed as testosterone boosters tend to stay more within the bodybuilding niche.
Interesting.
It's like they're trying to appeal to different audiences with the same ingredients
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah. It's all about marketing.
Yeah. So the book then gets into specific supplements,
Okay.
starting with creatine. It explains very clearly how it works, which is primarily by helping regenerate ATP,
Right.
which you can think of as your body's immediate source of energy,
Okay.
especially during short bursts of high-intensity exercise like weightlifting. Now, it does mention that there are different forms of creatine out there,
Yeah.
like creatine monohydrate, creatine citrate, and creatine ethyl ester.
Right.
But the ebook highlights that the vast majority of the scientific research has shown that creatine is effective for increasing muscle mass and improving performance.
Right.
They've used creatine monohydrate.
Yeah.
So their recommendation is pretty straightforward. Creatine monohydrate is an effective supplement.
So stick with what's been proven?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Next up is beta-alanine.
Okay.
The book explains that beta-alanine is a precursor to carnosine,
Right.
which is a compound found in your muscles. What's really interesting here is that research has shown that taking beta-alanine supplements can significantly increase the levels of carnosine in your muscles.
Oh, wow.
And this, in turn, has been linked to improved exercise capacity, particularly activities like cycling, where you're doing repeated bouts of high-intensity work.
Interesting.
Yeah. So then we come to probably one of the most popular supplements out there,
Yeah.
whey protein. The ebook correctly identifies it as a high-quality source of essential amino acids that's very easily digested and absorbed by the body.
Right.
But it goes beyond that. It also mentions some potential health benefits that have been associated with whey protein. Things like potentially reducing the risk of certain cancers,
Wow.
helping with HIV management, improving immune function, reducing stress and cortisol levels, and even having some positive effects on brain function, liver function, and blood pressure.
Wow. That's amazing.
It's pretty impressive for just a protein powder.
Right.
And then, of course, it highlights the research that confirms whey protein's role in enhancing lean body mass and improving performance,
Right.
especially when it's consumed strategically,
Right.
like around your workouts.
Yeah.
And it references several studies that have demonstrated, these positive anabolic responses,
Right.
meaning muscle building effects, and greater gains in lean muscle mass when whey protein is taken. often in combination with carbohydrates and other amino acids, particularly in that peri-workout window.
So that's where the timing really matters.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, the book also touches on the different types of whey protein that you can find, like concentrates and isolates.
Right.
And it makes a good point about the quality of the protein.
Right.
It emphasizes the value of what are called undenatured proteins,
Okay.
which means proteins that have retained their natural structure
Okay.
for optimal biological activity and benefits. And it points out that manufacturers need to use low temperature and low acid processing methods to preserve that natural structure.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because if they use high heat or harsh acids during processing, it can actually damage the protein and make it less effective.
So it's not just about getting any whey protein.
Right.
It's about looking for quality.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Moving along, the ebook discusses casein protein, which it highlights is digested and absorbed more slowly than whey protein,
Right.
which leads to a more sustained release of amino acids into the bloodstream over time.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of like a slow drip of amino acids versus a quick hit.
Right.
And it mentions a study that actually found that a group taking casein protein lost more body fat and gained more lean body mass compared to a group taking whey protein and a group that wasn't supplementing with protein at all.
Wow.
And this also resulted in greater strength increases in the casein group.
That's a pretty compelling finding.
It is, yeah.
So casein might be one to consider.
Right. And particularly maybe, before bed or during periods where you're going to be going for a long time without eating.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. All right. So up next, we have essential fatty acids,
Okay.
or EFAs.
Right.
And the book correctly identifies linoleic acid, which is an omega-6 fatty acid, and alpha-linolenic acid, which is an omega-3 fatty acid, as essential.
Okay.
Meaning our bodies can't produce them, so we have to get them from the foods we eat. And it provides some minimum recommended intakes for these.
Okay.
Now, what's particularly relevant here is the connection the book draws between a deficiency in omega-3 fatty acids and a lot of health issues, including obesity and insulin resistance,
Right.
which are often seen together in what's sometimes called Syndrome X.
Yeah.
Which is basically a cluster of conditions that include insulin resistance and high blood pressure and other things.
Right.
And it discusses this important role of prostaglandins,
Okay.
which are these hormone-like substances derived from EFAs,
Okay.
in regulating a wide range of bodily functions, including blood pressure, inflammation, and even processes involved in muscle growth.
Wow. Okay.
So it's not just about heart health and brain health, omega-3s. They actually play a role in muscle building as well.
So we need to make sure we're getting enough of those.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
So the ebook then goes into some specific dietary sources of these EFAs,
Okay.
talking about fish oil, which is rich in DHA and EPA, 2 important omega-3s, and flax oil, which is a good source of ALA,
Okay.
another omega-3. And it addresses this common question about, can our bodies effectively convert ALA into EPA and DHA?
Right.
Because some people say, well, I just eat flaxseed, so I'm good.
Right.
But the ebook mentions research that suggests that this conversion can actually be quite efficient,
Oh, okay.
especially when your diet is high in ALA and relatively low in linoleic acid,
Okay.
which is that main omega-6.
Got it.
So then the book covers calcium,
Okay.
and it's pretty straightforward about it. It basically says that simply increasing your calcium intake alone isn't going to directly build muscle
Okay.
or change your body composition in any significant way.
Right.
But it emphasizes how crucial calcium is for overall health,
Yeah.
especially bone health, nerve function, and muscle contraction.
Right.
And it points out that most Americans don't actually get enough calcium in their diets.
That's true.
So it recommends that athletes aim for at least 1,000 milligrams per day, with women potentially needing even more.
Okay.
And it suggests good food sources, as well as dairy-based protein supplements, as ways to ensure you're getting enough.
Right. So it's not just about, chugging milk all day, but you can get it from other sources too.
Exactly. Yeah, there are other options. Now, finally, the ebook briefly touches on a whole host of other supplements,
Okay.
ranging from arginine and carnitine to glutamine, DHEA, various plant extracts like Tribulus terrestris and ashwagandha,
Right.
and even some more complex compounds like GH-secretagogues and myostatin inhibitors.
Okay.
It's a pretty extensive list.
Okay.
But what really stands out as you read through this section is that for the vast majority of these supplements, the scientific evidence supporting the claims of significant improvements in muscle gain, fat loss, or strength is either not very strong or the results from studies have been very mixed or inconclusive, at least based on the information presented in this ebook.
So it sounds like it's really encouraging us to take a more cautious and skeptical approach to a lot of these products.
Exactly.
Right.
And it's not saying that all supplements are bad,
Right.
but it's saying that you really need to do your research and understand what the evidence says,
Right.
and not just believe the hype.
And to focus on those foundational things first,
Right.
the nutrition, the training.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, those are the things that are really going to move the needle.
So it's all about priorities.
It is.
It
is.
are.
It is. So as we come to the end of our deep dive into Bodybuilding Revealed, what would you say are the most important takeaways for our listener, from this discussion?
Well, I think for me, the key takeaways really center around understanding those fundamental roles of those main nutrients, protein for muscle building and repair, fat for hormone production and overall health, and carbohydrates for energy. And the book does a really good job of clearing up some of those common misunderstandings, like the idea that all protein sources are equally beneficial for muscle growth.
Yeah.
Or that all fat should be avoided.
Right.
It also emphasizes the importance of looking at the glycemic index of foods within the context of your whole diet,
Yeah.
rather than just focusing on individual foods in isolation.
Exactly.
And that discussion about TDEE, total daily energy expenditure, really drives home the point that, managing your overall calorie balance is the most important factor for whether you gain or lose weight.
Right.
And then all those practical tips on meal planning and timing,
Yeah.
give you some concrete strategies for putting all these nutritional principles into action.
Yeah, very helpful.
In your daily life.
And then finally, regarding supplements.
Yeah.
I think the book promotes that thoughtful and evidence-based approach.
Right.
Highlighting the ones with more solid scientific backing.
Yeah.
Like creatine, beta-alanine, and whey in casein protein. But it encourages a much more cautious and critical evaluation of those many other supplements on the market, where the evidence for significant benefits is just not as strong.
Yeah, I think it's a really good reminder that, a solid foundation of good nutrition and consistent training are those most crucial elements,
Right.
For achieving your physique goals.
Absolutely. The foundation is key.
So thinking about all this information that we've covered, especially the fact that everybody's body responds a little differently to diet and supplements,
Right.
and considering how many new products are constantly emerging, it makes you think, what is one aspect of your own nutrition or supplement routine that you might now be inspired to, look into a bit more deeply based on our conversation today?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and one I think all of our listeners should be asking themselves right now. I would encourage you to go back to your original sources.
Yeah.
Maybe even revisit some sections of Bodybuilding Revealed itself with this new understanding. Explore those concepts that stood out to you.
Yeah.
And, continue to learn and grow. The ebook mentions this BBR members area forum quite a bit.
Right.
And that sounds like a really valuable resource where you can delve even deeper into these topics and connect with other people who are also on this journey of understanding and applying these principles.
It's a great place to continue the conversation.
It is.